Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good evening, Wolf.
All right, I want to get to the Russia investigation. Got a few questions on that. But first, let's start with your reaction to how this meeting that the president had with the Democratic and Republican leadership over at the White House went. As you know, he said bye-bye after, 14 or 15 minutes, walked out of the room.
Well, we are in the midst of a reckless Trump shutdown that was precipitated initially by a presidential temper tantrum, and Donald Trump's behavior at the meeting today demonstrated that that, in fact, remains the case, which is incredibly unfortunate because not only is he holding 800,000 hard-working federal employees hostage to his desire to build an inefficient, ineffective, medieval border wall, but he is increasingly adversely impacting millions and millions of Americans who will be unable to get food assistance, unable to get farm loans, unable to get small business loans, unable to get mortgage loans, unable to get tax refunds that they rely upon to make ends meet. This reckless shutdown needs to end immediately, and then we can work out issues around border security, but we can't have a mature conversation about our broken immigration system and the things that we need to do in a bipartisan way in the midst of this presidential temper tantrum and this reckless Trump shutdown.
And that doesn't even include the 800,000 federal workers who are not going to get a paycheck on Friday, and how that's going to impact them and their families. You're the Democratic Party caucus chairman in the House of Representatives. So how do you move forward and figure a way out of this mess?
Well, we remain open, available, and interested in negotiating, but we just need our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, both in the House and, more importantly, in the Senate, to take yes for an answer. We continue to pass appropriations bills to reopen the government that were written and signed off on by Senate Republicans, including the bill that passed the House of Representatives today that would reopen the Department of the Treasury and the Internal Revenue Service so we can ensure that tens of millions of Americans will be able to receive their tax refunds on a timely basis. We're sending that bill over to the Senate. Hopefully Mitch McConnell will see fit.
Well, let me interrupt you, Congressman, because Mitch McConnell says he's not going to bring up anything that the president isn't immediately going to sign into law. So no votes on the Senate floor, no matter what you guys in the House of Representatives pass. And the president says, you know what, there's got to be some money, some significant money for some sort of barrier, a steel barrier, as he likes to call it now, forget about a concrete wall. Unless you come up with some funds for that, this isn't going anywhere.
Well, the offer that has been on the table is at least $1.3 billion in additional funding, perhaps as much as 1.6.
Well, will any of that 1.6 go for a wall or a steel barrier or some sort of fence?
Now, let me tell you what that 1.6 billion will go for. It's what the experts have said would improve security along the border. So enhanced fencing in areas where you have fencing that currently exists or other barriers that need to be reinforced. We think that that's reasonable. We also believe that we need satellites and drones and cell phone towers and enhanced communication capability, scanners that can allow for our Border Patrol agents to actually detect when illegal drugs are coming through our legal ports of entry, which, as you know, Wolf, is the actual area where a majority of drugs come into this country, despite Donald Trump's false claims. We're trying to proceed in an evidence-based fashion, anchored in the reality of what is actually taking place on the border, not Donald Trump's fantasy world, where he made a political promise to his base that he was going to build a wall and Mexico would pay for it. Mexico clearly has refused to pay for it. And the great deal maker, Donald Trump, has been unable to convince them otherwise. For the last 2 years, Republicans have controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency, yet they failed to allocate a dime to Donald Trump to build his border wall. It's unreasonable to think that, having been repudiated at the polls by the American people, Democrats picked up 40 seats, that the new Democratic majority will do for him with respect to this border wall what his Republicans have failed to do over the last 2 years because it's totally ineffective.
You've predicted, Congressman, that more House Republicans are going to come over to your side. But look at this, only one more Republican joined with Democrats in this evening's vote on the financial services spending bill. And the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, sticking with the president's strategy. So is what you hope will emerge wishful thinking?
Well, I certainly hope that we will see reason prevail and that many of my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle will cease conducting themselves like a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump administration and would actually do the business of the American people, which should involve reopening the government. You have Coast Guard workers who are working without pay. You have Border Patrol agents working without pay. TSA agents working without pay. That is unconscionable that we are allowing this circumstance to continue to exist. And as you pointed out, on January 11th, will not perhaps receive a paycheck that they need in order to make it through the month for their families. And hopefully, over the next few days, we'll see additional Republicans join us in our efforts simply to reopen the government.
And so many of these federal workers, they live paycheck to paycheck. They need the money, and they need it immediately, and they're not apparently going to get it on Friday. Let's turn, while I have you, Congressman, to the Russia investigation. As you know, the former Trump campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, shared some sensitive internal Trump campaign polling data with a Russian with ties to Russia's military intelligence services. And we've now learned that Manafort also wanted that data to go to two pro-Russian Ukrainian oligarchs who owed him some money. So how concerning is that to you?
Well, it's deeply concerning, and this is why we have to make sure that the Bob Mueller investigation is able to continue to proceed in a fashion where he can continue to collect the facts and connect that with the applicable law, and then eventually present those conclusions to the Department of Justice, to Congress, and to the American people. With every passing day, every passing week, every passing month, the circumstances around the 2016 campaign and the possible conspiracy that seems like it may have existed between Russian spies and some high-level members of the Trump campaign to sell out our democracy grows stronger. And that is deeply troubling for the republic, for the democracy, and for a significant number of American people.
Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, tells Reuters the president won't answer any more questions from Mueller, won't do any more interviews in writing or in person. He's only done them in writing so far once. And he's promising a fight if they decide to issue a subpoena to the president. What does that tell you?
Well, Rudolph Giuliani was a failed mayor, then a failed presidential candidate. Now he's a failed lawyer, and it's unfortunate that he's decided to take this obstructionist approach with respect to the investigation. Again, we need to allow this investigation to run its course. You would think that the president and his allies, if he truly is innocent of any involvement in the mess that took place in 2016, would be willing to fully cooperate. That does not seem to be the case. But on the Hill, well, if we as House Democrats, we're going to continue to focus on those kitchen table pocketbook issues that are important to the American people. That's why we were sent here, lowering health care costs, increasing pay, infrastructure. Hopefully we can end this shutdown, let Mueller be Mueller, and be able to proceed improving the quality of life of everyday Americans.
On that note, we'll leave it. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, once again, congratulations to your election to the House leadership.